Hello. Welcome everybody to this Transit Month event. And being with Transit Month being celebrated in the Bay Area here in person and elsewhere in California and around the universe by Zoom. Do we have the Around the Universe by Zoom here ready to roll? Is that a yeah? Okay. Cool. So there's water in the back in the pictures if you need it. Bathrooms are back and left. My name is Adina Levin. I'm the co-founder and ED of Seamless Bay Area, which is a nonprofit that started with a vision of world-class, rider-friendly, well-coordinated, equitable, and accessible public transportation here in the Bay Area, which isn't what we had back when we started about 5 years ago with 27 transit agencies, 27 that had not historically worked together all that well on things like fares and schedules and signs and planning and funding when those 27 agencies would fight together like cats and dogs, leaving us transit riders with an experience that was janky and slow and less affordable and really less appealing and convenient than it should be, which led quite a lot of people driving cars on the road, adding to congestion and pollution, making it harder for people who depend on transit as a main or only way of mobility, and making it a lot harder to reach our goals of more affordable housing and climate. And we have since then made some significant progress in that. And progress starts with a vision. It starts with a vision of a world that is different and better or worse. Well, progress is better. And so, at any rate, I got the idea for this panel in 2023 when Annalee Newitz, uh, who's an author of science fiction and science and history, published Terraformers, which is a science fiction work set in the far distant future, tens of thousands of years in the future on a planet being terraformed from rock. And the corporate overlords who owned the planet needed transportation and land use designed from scratch. One of the things that Annalee Newitz did, which I learned from the KQED forum being hosted by Alexis Madrigal, um, that as a consultant went to Jeffery Tumlin, who was then head of SFMTA, and they came up with a genetically engineered system of sentient flying trains who make collaborative decisions together about how to route their trains, which is maybe an ideal solution from someone running a transit system to collaborate with their peers without any pesky customers or politicians or advocates bothering about what they should do. Um, in our world today, without yet genetically engineered sentient flying trains, we do need human governance systems and policies, and this is where we have been making some progress since then. And the book also shows the terraformers going out to survey the emerging cities to help plan this transit system, and we see that the places are being lived in by the people who are working on the cities. But once they open up this terraform planet, up to the market, which the real estate developers who own this planet want to do to make money, it is not at all clear that the workers who live there are going to be able to stay there. Sound familiar? So, um, and the workers who get their paychecks from these corporations that own the planet also have some of their own ideas and are doing their own organizing. And you'll need to read more of the book or maybe hear more from the panel to hear more about that. I was really fascinated by this book. and by the way that this portrayal in science fiction of the transportation systems and the planning for places and how the places worked really was kind of eye-opening and, really the subject of reflection about what our places look like, how they work, how the politics work, who it is being planned for, who the future is for, whose future is it? And I thought, wow, this would be quite a panel discussion. And maybe somebody other than me would be interested in it. And here we are. So, and anyway, you'll hear from me a bit again at the end, including in a segue from our imagined future to our very, very real future here in the Bay Area and also elsewhere in California and elsewhere about how we can help shape our future and what we can do to steer away from dystopia to a more human-friendly future. So I'm going to turn this over to Audrey Williams. To moderate from here. Audrey is a poet and writer with Black American and Indo-Burmese heritage. She earned her MFA in creative writing from the California College of the Arts, is an active literary citizen in the Bay Area, having curated readings, if I can't read, but Audrey can, for San Francisco Litquake, Beast Crawl, and more. She's the co-chair of the World Fantasy Convention 2026 to be held in Oakland. All right, over to Audrey.
Thank you, Dina. Full house. Thank you, everybody, for dropping by. It's like right after. Oh, is this on? Can you hear me okay? Is that good? Okay, so my role tonight is going to be to moderate this amazing brainiac panel of super creative and smart people, and I will do our best to help us navigate. That was a pun. We're just going to try to make sure we can segue and pivot and get through all the amazing material that we have tonight. So I'm going to go through and read everyone's bios. First of all, first up, we have Annalee Newitz. Annalee Newitz is yeah, give it up. Annalee is a science journalist who also writes science fiction. They are the author of several books, including the latest Automatic Noodle, an instant USA Today bestseller. Check out that snazzy t-shirt. What? The Terraformers, which was nominated for the Nebula Award, and For Lost Cities, A Secret History of the Urban Age. They have a monthly column in New Scientist magazine and are the co-host of the Hugo-winning podcast, Our Opinions Are Correct. Give it up for Annalee. And next to Annalee, we have Vincent Wu, who is the director of the movie Tunnel Vision, which was shot, yes, give it up for Tunnel Vision. Tunnel Vision was shot with an unauthorized camera stuck to the front of a moving BART train. He is currently attempting to 3D scan the entire city of San Francisco. Give it up for Vincent. Oh, thank you for that. Jeff is much more organized than I am. What a difference. I feel like I should go back and start again. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Just kidding. Then to the left of Vincent, we have Alissa Walker, who just flew in from LA. Give it up for Alissa. Alissa is a writer based in Los Angeles, where she has covered transportation, housing, urban design, public space, and environmental policy for 2 decades. She edits the newsletter Torched, which tracks the legacy improvements that LA is making for upcoming mega events. Alissa is the 2021 recipient of the Stephen Heller Prize for Cultural Commentary for her writing on design and urbanism, and played herself on the traffic safety episode of Adam Conover's show, Adam Ruins Everything. Give it up for Alissa. And then next to Alissa, we have Jeffery Tumlin. Woohoo! Jeff led the SFMTA through COVID, the rise of autonomous vehicles, and loss of 1/3 of the agency's revenues due to work from home policies. To address these challenges, he oversaw rapid improvement in Muni's speed and reliability, resulting in an approximately 70% reduction in subway delays, up to 30% reductions in bus delays, and the highest public approval rating for the Muni since data was very first collected in 2001. Give it up for Jeff. Woohoo! And then last, but absolutely not least, we have Alexis Madrigal. Woo! Give it up for Alexis. Alexis is a journalist based out of Oakland, California. He's the co-host of KQED's current affairs show Forum, a contributing writer at The Atlantic, and author of the book Powering the Dream: The History and Promise of Green Technology. Woo! Previously, he was the editor-in-chief of Fusion and a staff writer at Wired. Give it up for Alexis. Woo! All right, so we're going to jump right in, and I'm going to pass the microphone over to Annalee, who's going to talk to us about terraformers.
All right. Did anybody take the 38 Geary to get here? All right. Nice. 38 used to be my bus when I lived in the Richmond. Now I'm in Noe Valley, so the J is my train, which, whatever, we can talk about my feelings about that. Well, I'm sure we all have feelings about that. But the 38 is an incredible bus. And if you're old enough, you might remember a free video that was going around the city about 20 years ago, just called The 38 Geary. And you could get it for free at La Video. And it was just about people riding the 38 and like weird crap that happened to them on the 38. I got my wallet stolen on the 38 for the first time, and not the last time. But also, I kind of grew up riding on the 38. And one of the things about it is that oftentimes, almost always, it's two cars, right? And it's got that little like circly thing in the middle. What is that called, Jeff? What is that called? Sexy flexy? You know what I'm talking about, though? Like when you're a kid, that's where you want to ride, right? Like the little circly thing, because it like moves around and it feels really cool. It's got the flexy stuff. And it makes the bus feel alive. It feels like you're riding inside like a giant animal, a dinosaur, like some kind of creature. And that's always how I've felt about buses. But it's the 38 that taught me that buses can be alive. And that is a lot of what inspired some of what happens in the terraformers. And thanks, Adina, for giving a good kind of backstory on this novel. But it's basically, it's your standard, terraforming type story. I think we're all familiar with terraforming. Does anyone want me to tell you what terraforming is? Just when you come to a planet and you transform it into something Earth-like, right? So that's the terra part of terraforming. And so this is a novel set 50,000 years in the future. So like there's a lot of hand wavium in the technology. And people are able to just convert a piece of rock into a kind of Pleistocene Earth. And, when usually you get a terraforming story, it's either centered on that kind of sciencey stuff, like how do we build a planet, or it's focused on war, like Dune, because Dune is fundamentally a story about terraforming. It's like who's going to control the terraforming. It's usually all that stuff. But I wanted to talk about if you were building a brand new civilization on a brand new planet, how would people get around? And that's actually a huge question. Like, what's the mobility going to be? We want people to move here. How are they, going to get from point A to point B, particularly during the phase of building the planet, when you have lots of laborers on the planet who need to get from the city to the country to plant farms, and that kind of stuff. So that is why I centered a lot of the action in this incredibly weird science fiction novel on the scientists and the land planners and the transit experts who were trying to figure out how to navigate corporate politics in order to have a train system that actually works for everyone. And we see them, going around and doing the kind of everyday work of people who were like interviewing neighbors to say like, well, how do you use the train? If you could have a train that goes anywhere, where would you like to go? What's the typical hours that you use the train? So we see that happening. And then we see them trying to figure out, how do we build a train that won't get sabotaged by corporate interests? So you have to understand, this is 50,000 years in the future. So one of the main characters is a flying moose. Another one of the main characters is a biotech expert who's a cow, who also flies because, I mean, if you're going to make a intelligent cow, you might as well have them fly, just like the moose. Some of the characters are robots. There's a major character who's a door, who later has kind of a cool romance with a drone. And then it makes a little bit more sense to you that when these characters are coming up with an idea for how do you build a train network that can't be fucked with, that they're like, why don't we just build sentient flying trains? Because they can figure out for themselves the best routes, the best ways to interact with city governments or corporate entities who control the land. So they do. It's kind of gray area legal. It's about as legal as the stuff that Vincent is doing. It's like kind of. Are you building any sentient trains?
It's all recorded.
So it's, they're not really supposed to build sentient trains because the corporate interests that own this planet really want to control the transit themselves. And what they actually want to do is make sure that the transit doesn't go between cities because they want to keep people in the city, buying shit in the city and not leaving, and also doing their work in the city. And they're like, well, what if though we had trains that could just fly from city to city? When I interviewed Jeff about how trains would work, one of the things that he pointed out to me, that's okay. I have slides. That's my book. So you can see on one side, it's sort of less terraformed than on the other side. But one of the things that Jeff pointed out to me is that nobody actually likes shit flying overhead. So that if we're going to have flying trains, they really have to land in the cities and then kind of take off outside. So that was actually a really interesting piece of data. And he and I actually talked a lot about what the trains would be like, what kind of a consciousness that a train might have. And Jeff was like, obviously the train is going to be obsessed with strategy games. And I was like, yes, obviously, of course. So that was actually all really helpful feedback. And and so I just wanted to say like one more thing about this in the context of like when you wonder like why would a science fiction writer write a story about a sentient flying train if it isn't just to have fun with the idea? Because I'm a big believer in taking responsibility for our metaphors and making sure that the metaphor actually goes beyond just like, wow, it's super cool when this flying train, falls in love with a cat journalist, because that's, how you get, the cat bus. So, which actually the cat bus doesn't happen, but in case you're wondering how that happens. Anyway, what I really wanted to think about in this book was what would happen if we treated all parts of our urban ecosystems as equal partners in relationship with each other. What would happen if when we came to the table to make bargains about how to plan land use, we treated transit as just as important as an oligarch, or just as important as what the moose and the cows want, or what farmers want? How do we imagine a world where all of those stakeholders come to the table and are treated with equal respect and equal dignity? And so one way to do that metaphorically is to create a world where everything can talk back to you. And so if you're building a farm that sucks, the cows are going to say, what the hell are you doing? Or if you build a transit system that's designed to immiserate people, the transit system will talk back to you. That is not a thing we can do in real life. But what we can do is tell stories where transit is represented as an important stakeholder. And what these sentient flying trains really represent are all of the people who make mobility possible in our lives, the people who run the buses, the people who fix the buses, the people who attach cameras to the front of BART so that we can see how beautiful it is when BART goes through the whole system. All of these people are represented by these sentient flying trains. And of course, the resources required to make those trains available to us and to make enough of them available to us. And so, yep, this is a fun story about like trains flying around, but it is also a story about how to reimagine our public sphere and reimagine civic engagement where humans are not the center of everything. In fact, we're just one node in a big ecosystem of lots and lots and lots of creatures and infrastructures that need to be cared for equally. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love that. And so it makes me think about it, the sense of community, but not just human, expanding our horizons to non-human kin, if you will. So we're going to segue over to Jeff now, going from your 50,000 years in the future to, I think, Jeff, you have some slides. Should I?
This one is good for now.
Okay.
So much of speculative fiction is about dealing with our traumas, and dealing with our traumas either by showing us a path out, an alternative view like Star Trek, or a cautionary tale of what happens if we continue going down this same path like Blade Runner. 2020 was a rather traumatic year, particularly for transit in San Francisco. So in March of 2020, we had lockdown in San Francisco. And my counterparts around the country, particularly in New York City, were going to a dozen funerals every week of their staff who were frontline workers and dying of COVID. Our agency lost half of our revenue. I had no way of making payroll. And with about a third of our workforce out on quarantine, something we did to protect them as best as we could, we had no way of actually being able to run trains because I didn't know if I would have enough train controllers in any given day in order to actually operate the service. In fact, I had no idea who among my operators would be able to show up on any morning. So I had no way of actually trying to run any schedule. Our entire team was utterly traumatized. And in the same year that we were going through all this, a couple of very interesting things happened. One was this funny little short story that an author named Annalee Newitz had written in the San Francisco Chronicle in July. As the Chronicle was starting to try to think of, holy cow, how do we recover from this and what might San Francisco look like in the near future? And Annalee imagined a near future, like 2 years from now, in which we had taken the lessons of George Floyd and reallocated some of the city budget in order to actually direct social services where they were needed to solve problems before they started. And that meant training people and putting them on the 38 in order to make sure that people got the services that they needed, knowing that that was a heck of a lot cheaper than cleaning up the mess when things fell apart. And this, I sobbed when I read this short story. Like it was so simple and so profound. And I thought, what can I do in order to set up a recovery in which this is possible? Of course, we didn't get the police department's budget. Indeed, the opposite happened. But we still reallocated resources in order to start taking care of people the best we could as a struggling agency. Another thing that happened that same year for me is I was at this horrible, horrible technology conference. Oh God, it was awful. But there was a great speaker at this awful conference who was Hannah Beekler.
And you guys figure out which one.
Hannah was, and you can go to the next slide, was the design lead for Black Panther, which of course had magnetic levitation trains, powered by vibranium that connected, all of Wakanda together. I mean, it was amazing. But the thing that completely bowled me over when I first saw Black Panther back in 2018, and that Hannah Beekler explained to us in her incredibly powerful speech, next slide, was that central to her idea about the design of all of Wakanda, next slide. There we go. Her design of the Golden City of Wakanda, what's up? Stop there. Was not only designing a whole city that started with people and their culture and their values, but also designing an entire transportation system, starting with people and their values first. So yes, there were trains, but there were also streets that were completely dominated, not only by people, but by all the funny little daily life and, school kids playing in the street with their little backpacks. Next slide. You can stop there. And these stories to me, in fact, stories, dating back, in fact, for me as a child watching Star Trek, imagining cities of the future, and particularly transportation systems of the future, where technology was used in the service of people, and particularly the most vulnerable among us, where technology was used to equalize opportunity, to connect everyone to opportunity as a tool for making societies be more inclusive, be more welcoming to everyone, and allow everyone to achieve their fullest purpose. Indeed, transportation doesn't serve an end unto itself. Transportation is simply about connecting people to opportunity. And so that's one of the many reasons why not only did I love the work of Hannah Beachler, but also all of the ways in which Annalee has used transportation and its social function in all of their work. And there's, of course, another story that I found inspiring, but I'm going to let Alissa Walker talk about that, which is the role of transportation in reimagining Los Angeles as if we were capable of building at the pace and the quality of poorer countries. And instead using that to focus on people as well. Alissa.
And that's why I'm going to talk about Blade Runner. No, I'm just kidding. I think we might need to do like a hard refresh on the slides because that's not that should not be the next. Can we like maybe hit update really quickly? That's it. That's it. You got it. Okay, you got it. Yeah, go to the Joaquin Phoenix looking upset. Oh, that's all of them. Yeah, go right there. Yeah, you can play from there. Yeah, press play. Thank you. I didn't put any clips in. Sorry. We don't have permission from Spike Jones to use this film. No, I. That's right. Great. I know. Do you want me? I mean, we can move the computer if it's easier. I don't want to bother. Will it stretch? Okay. I'm happy to. Okay. I just have a lot, so it's annoying. Okay. You're doing great. You're doing great. Yes, I was brought up from LA to be the her expert. I remember going to see this film in 2013. It was like an advanced preview. Nobody really knew what it was about. And the gasps in the audience just at the transit references, if you lived in LA, it was like nobody knew what was coming for us. And I'll kind of talk about that. I like to call it the best film ever made about transit-oriented development. And I think that is like something to think about as we go through this, what our possible future is. Next slide, please. Some people think, you told me that people think it's set in 2025. And I actually asked some people who worked on it, and they referred me to the script. Oh. And they said it's just slightly in the future. It never quite says that it's 2025. But one thing I just loved I started reading the script. It's such a lovely script. I think, did it win? It didn't win something for the screenplay. I feel like it was an Oscar or something. Very great, very good script. I like how it says the LA basin is more crowded and dense, resembling Shanghai, but it says it's a city designed for comfort and ease. And that I feel like is such wonderful framing for the transportation of the future. Next slide, please. And And these are these scenes that we, I literally in this room of like, I don't know, it was a very small theater, like this size, and this would pop up. And the next one, this is a real subway station. I used it this morning, the Hollywood and Western station on my way to the Burbank airport. It's not high-speed rail time yet, but it's coming. And then when he goes through this station and then he pops up at the beach, they completed the subway to the sea in 2013 before it had opened. So the visionary thought of like how this transit network was supposed to, be realized, next slide, was even shown in one of the stations. And when I saw the movie, I was like, oh my gosh, there's somebody made this whole map, and the graphic designer, Jeff McFetridge, had actually made the map. And I emailed him and was like, can you send me the map? He's like, oh yeah, I thought really hard about this map. And you can see some of them are very like specific, and they're kind of real places like Beverly Boulevard, but there's also like nail salon, and then there's like 3 LAX stops. And if you remember in the movie, he goes all the way up to Angeles National Forest and goes in the snow, and that's depicted in the map as well. On the yellow line, I don't know. Yeah, just the colors are. Yes, absolutely. No, I don't know. But next. So this movie came out in 2013, and I thought about it a lot. I do think this has influenced, like this has become real. So, and I think the movie actually did help. So if you go to the next slide, just 3 years after the movie came out, we approved Measure M. And this was the most transformative transportation funding policy that's probably ever been done in the United States. And we are building the most rail of anywhere in the North America right now. And we now have the second highest ridership behind New York City. Sorry to our Chicago fans here. So we have done a very good job with laying out the money. We don't have as many fiscal concerns as friends up here, sorry, but we were really able to do it. And if you go back, oh, sorry, no, it's okay. There's just 2 wonderful articles written by me that I'm sure helped pass it at Curbed, RIP Curbed. I'm sure that helped. And then the other thing that happened that was, I'm not sure if it's a good or bad thing yet, I'll let you know in 2028, we got the Olympics, and Metro decided to, well, we didn't get them, nobody else wanted them. And Metro decided to accelerate 28 projects in advance of 2028. How's that going? I'll let you know in 2028. But as you can see, this map is kind of starting to fill in. It looks closer and closer to the one that Jeff envisioned. Next slide. But the problem is now we've said we're going to have these car-free games. We've said we're going to have these like transit-centric Olympics, right? And there's all these great visions for what that looks like and how people can get around. But we're out of time basically when it comes to building our stuff. And that's because of the leadership. And instead, the car-free games now have Uber as a sponsor and flying cars as a sponsor. And I said, when we said car-free games, we meant flying cars as well. These will not be real. These will not happen by 2028. So don't worry. Sorry, no. Well, I'll explain it to you, but it's basically like a partnership that's like about speculative fiction. It's like a storytelling partnership. So they go on the Tonight Show and they're like, everyone will be in these by 2028, but they don't. Maybe. So next slide. But what I really want to emphasize is that what we're missing are the small things. The small things are the future, the small futures, the speculative fiction, and that's like every block. And I took these all today as Jeff took me around, and you can credit him for probably all of these things. But this is what we actually need to achieve, say, our car-free future or the equitable future, or the one that doesn't cost so much. So let's aim for the small future. And then we also need to build a shit ton of housing. So SB 79 might pass today. I don't know.
So I'm thinking whoops. Is that on? Okay. So there were some thought starter questions that we have. And I just want to check in, Adina, we're at 6:44. Would you like to do some crosstalk, or should we move along to? Little bit. Yeah. Okay. So one of the questions that came up, we were thinking about like how are futures and alternative worlds constructed and by whom? So I feel like we've talked about that somewhat. Maybe we should look at examples that we want to criticize. When we had our earlier discussion about this, one of the things that came up was Snowpiercer. Right? Who wants to talk about some anti-examples? Nope. Anybody want to? I mean, we all had like came up with like different examples from different works, and I just wanted to open the floor and just sort of have a little break from like moving panelist to panelist to see if anything.
Have you heard the conspiracy theory that Snowpiercer takes place as a sequel in universe to Charlie? Uh, what's the chocolate factory one called?
Willy
yeah,
Wonka.
yeah, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory story.
No, what? Tell us.
Yeah, because like the main guy of the train also has the WW initials, and if you think about how fantastical the machine is, and the sort of way in which people have like individual punishment chambers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
use
the
of child
children.
labor.
Yeah, so and I think some of the characters are reminiscent of the children too. Like there's this woman on the train that I think is supposed to be the girl child that grows too large in Willy Wonka. Anyway, think about it. Think about it. It makes sense. I don't know. Like, I don't know where the Koreans come in, but I think they needed the money. Yeah.
I'm a runner, so I eat all these goo packets, and every time I do, I think of like the stuff that they make the like protein bars. It kind of looks a lot like all this stuff runners eat now.
Like the goo from the train.
The goo from the train, that's made out of bugs that turns into these like bricks, and that's what all the poor people get.
I think it's people.
Oh, good.
No, it's made out of cockroaches. At least
Yeah, I thought
in
it was
the movie.
yeah.
I don't know about the TV show, but
Oh.
in the movie it's cockroaches,
Yeah.
which actually is kind of utopian
Yeah.
because like shouldn't we be eating
eat
cockroaches?
the
I
bugs.
don't know. Like I'm like looking forward to eating bugs in the future. It's like much more sustainable. Yeah, let's go for bugs after you guys. Yeah, definitely mealworms. I'm into it. Are there other examples of bad
train.
So
train?
Bad train.
well, so there's a theme, starting with the Jetsons to Fifth Element to Blade Runner to so many sci-fi films where we abandon like the transportation conditions on the ground are so bad that people of privilege move all of their transportation up into the air, and the ground is just completely abandoned to those completely lacking in privilege. And this is all over the place in sci-fi, and it is also in advertising for services like Uber Air. Go to YouTube and look up the old ads for Uber Air, which is now defunct, but it's the same old story of, some harried commuter late to, pick up their kids. And they're like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? And so, of course, they go grab an Uber Air and they're handed, a glass of champagne. And the money shot is them looking down at the poor plebeians on the ground below, stuck in traffic congestion, because, if we can't just add another lane to solve our traffic congestion problems, then surely the solution is adding lanes in the sky.
Yeah, that makes me think about how so many stories about public transit really are not so secretly stories about class privilege or lack thereof, right? They're about class. I mean, that's certainly what Snowpiercer is about, is like, what if first class on the train was like something much more profound than just the time when you're on the train, right? And so I think some of these really dark visions of the future are much more about a widening gap between rich and poor. And that's why Her is so delightful. I mean, it is true that we don't really meet anyone who's impoverished or even working class, but like it seems like everyone is riding on the metro, right? It's like it's something that is no matter what class you are, you get to ride to the beach. And that was the story in San Francisco, like in the 19th century when Sutro was like, I'm going to build a train that connects downtown to the beach. He was trying to undercut the fact that, all the shitbags who like lived out on, whatever in the fancy part of town who owned all the railroads, you had to take two railroads to get out to, what was the name? What was the company that had the trains that were?
United Railroads.
It was United Railroad. And you had to get out to the beach, you had to take two trains, and that was 10 cents. And Sutro was like, well, I'll give you one train and it'll be a nickel. And it went down Clement Street. So I always feel sad when I go to Clement Street and we miss out on that. But the point is that, yeah, I think that like the good vision is transit for everyone. And then the dark vision is rich people have flying cars and everybody else has nothing.
So I'm going to segue from that. Speaking of vision, I think this is a good segue to tunnel vision. Vincent, hello. So for those who don't know, Vincent is up to some illegal shenanigans, one of which being gray area.
Gray area stuff.
We'll call it gray
We
area.
could play a trailer. I don't know.
Can we do this?
I could just talk over it.
Is this?
Yeah, I
is
mean,
this-
I think if you just hit play, it'll work.
See?
Or it might not. I don't know. Yeah, there you go. Just enjoy these
See the
visuals.
camera on the front
I
of a
guess
BART
I
train.
can talk a little bit about how
Do
I
it.
did it. Yeah. I just had the idea. I think it was like 2023 or something. And I thought it's not fair that BART operators get to see this and we don't, us plebeians stuck in the rest of the train. And I thought they couldn't really stop me either. So I just taped a camera to the front of the train and then I collected it after, and it was a pretty good time. I realized I looked at the footage and I thought like, holy shit, like it's actually way better than I thought. And then I made a movie about it, and then I forced them to release the footage on their own. Like they have to do this now too, because all the foamers got really excited and they're like, how come you guys don't do this? So if you go on Bart's YouTube now, they have a bunch of these. They have the red and yellow lines out already, so you can watch them. But actually, I didn't even really want to talk about this. I was going to talk about, have you guys heard of Terra Ignota? This is my favorite science fiction novel in some respects written in the last decade. It's up there. It's like my top 5. And it has a really weird vision for public transit in the future. I think the year is like roughly, what is it, like the year 3000 or something? Yeah, it's at least 1,000 years, but not so far that like they don't speak English or anything anymore. Like you would recognize some they still have Europe. Europe still exists. So in this world, they have a really like, I think us sitting here today would struggle to call it public transit, but it's a universe in which every citizen can call basically a private flying car at any moment. And in fact, the global system of transit anticipates that you are going to call it and sends the car to your house in advance. And this car fundamentally can transport you anywhere in the world in about 30 minutes, which is crazy. And I know that doesn't really sound like public transit, but this is like one of the most shocking things I'd ever like seen as a premise for a world. And let me tell you why. Like, I'm going to say, this is going to sound crazy too. Around the same time I was reading this book, a friend of mine was applying for a job to be like a PM at Meta or something. And she was like, one of the questions they asked me was like if we accidentally invented teleportation, like we being the company, like how would we sell that? Like, what's our go-to-market strategy? And because I had been reading Terra Ignota, I was like, you should have shaken the interviewer and said, what you are proposing is the death of the nation state, right? Like if anyone can go anywhere in the world, like what does it even mean to have a geographic nation at all? And the world of Terra Ignota is sort of built on this premise. Like in their past, they've had a series of incredibly violent wars sort of incited by transportation that took people from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world at the speed of thought. Anyway, I think it's a really cool series. I'm just trying to get people to read it. It got robbed for the Hugo in 2016. So no, I didn't get robbed. I mean, there was another good one. Yeah, it's yeah, Ada Palmer. Yeah, fantastic debut work. Yeah, I'm also trying to scan the city of San Francisco. This is also sort of illegal. So if you have a good roof in a hilly area, I'd like to talk to you so that I can fly a drone from your roof. I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't really know why I did this either, to be honest. It's just really pretty. Like, I think I'm inspired by things that are impossible for a single person to build. Because I can only imagine what I can do. It's like, it's really impossible for me to imagine. Like, I get really awestruck. Maybe Alexis will talk about this a little bit too. But like when the framers of BART had the idea for BART, they couldn't have known.
I was just going to say, I think that's an excellent segue. Speaking of things that are impossible,
Yeah.
there is a time when our current BART system was itself speculative. So perhaps we can go
Yeah,
to the
totally.
next slide.
I mean, I think one of the things that I get really excited about when I'm in the archives is finding these sort of like ghosts of infrastructure never been, you know? And BART is an incredible example of that. You know, if you are looking at this, BART running to Santa Rosa, BART running down to Los Gatos, and all these things. We still don't have a BART system with this kind of reach. You know, they put together like a subcontractor of Bechtel put together like an incredible series of reports, some of which were these kind of cut out futurism, you know, where you've got on the top the actual photograph, and then you have this like, I mean, I guess Bart looks like that. That's, I guess, what they were thinking. The half bullet of Bart, you know. But more importantly, they had to imagine a system that could become a bond measure, right? I mean, this is really the key of the imaginative exercise of BART is like before they can do anything, they have to get the money from some kind of measure. And this is really where BART breaks down. Many people may know this, but of course, the different counties start pulling out. So really you end up with this system which only has some of the counties which are involved. You know, one of the things that I have found fascinating about it is like, you know, the renderings and the things only kind of get you so far. You know, they didn't actually do the work to build the polity that would actually support this kind of thing. And I think in many ways, the system that we ended up with was really a system that many people saw for what it was, which was basically a commuter train. And so a lot of people said like, well, why would we want this particular commuter train? You know, is this really going to serve our needs in all of these different parts of the Bay? You know, it was built around and premised around a vision of the metropolitan area that was just bringing everybody to downtown. And so all of these people around the Bay Area had to struggle with this sense of like, well, it maybe is good for us to be able to get to downtown San Francisco, but it's also going to take away from our particular place. And it's also probably not going to help many of our people as much as it might. Instead, it's going to help the people coming in from Walnut Creek. It's going to help the people coming in from these other parts of the Bay Area. I guess, yeah, the last thing that I'll say about the sort of imaginative exercise of BART is like, I still feel like it's kind of ongoing. Like I see tunnel vision as part of that, right? I see part of it as we had this sort of incomplete mid-century planning vision of what things should be. What's really exciting about it is, of course, they had a vision. For Christ's sake, you know? I mean, they had to, if you really think about what had to happen for BART to be built, they had to have what were called at the time right-of-way men who went to every single parcel along the whole way and bought all the land from all these people. They had to come up with a process. They had to spin it up in just a couple of years. There's at the San Francisco Public Library, there's like an incredible collection of a BART right-of-way man with all this stuff around what it was like, including, you know, the mid-century figures who put this whole program together. Of course, when you look and you read through all this stuff, on the one hand, it seems incredibly fair. They did 2 appraisals for every property, and then they gave the people the highest price. But if you go to the people who were on the ground, say in West Oakland or around the Daly City Station, which was an emergent Black neighborhood in Ingleside, they of course think this was a terribly unfair process that did not give them anywhere close to their the values of their properties. And so you're just going to have this situation, I guess, where you had a 20th century vision, mid-century, designed exclusively, essentially, by upper middle class men and middle class men doing this sort of right-of-way work, which largely enriched a series of contractors that were bought into the city, like Bechtel, which got a huge chunk of the money for the creation of BART. And it left out, both from the planning as well as the execution, as well as the operation of BART, all kinds of people. And so when I think that imaginative exercise now is like, how do we get the trains on board? You know, the trains as metaphor for all the people, right? And while also maintaining the level of vision that we saw in the BART days. And I feel like we haven't really seen quite that yet.
Well, believe it or not, we are absolutely on time. So next up, Adina has a few words to talk about what's going on right now. Future of Bart.
All right. So before we go into the Q&A, and this was especially a request from Annalee, because we've gone through any number of portrayals of the past, from the creation of Muni and the creation of Bart, and what it means to have a vision of the future, and is it going to be a dystopian future, or is it going to be a future that's really friendly for people, where like a variety of people are comfortable, where our streets are a good place to be and have a diversity of people, and people are cared for. And especially here in the Bay Area, we are at a turning point in history. And where we are today, Tuesday, is a different place than where we were last week. Um, um, yeah. Um, so as I think we heard from Jeffrey, the financial problems caused by the pandemic for Bay Area transit continued and left Muni and BART and Caltrain and AC Transit and some other agencies with financial challenges that, without additional funding, we're going to have really significant cutbacks and go many, many, many decades backward into a city and a region that is a lot less equitable and good place to live. So fortunately, there is some legislation to do a ballot measure in 5 counties. And speaking of healing the gaps in the history, BART and Caltrain all together serve 5 counties, and the 2 counties that weren't in the BART system to begin with had to choose to join this ballot measure, and were dragged in with a lot of love and public comment. And with that, we're going to have it's going to require a signature gathering effort starting in the winter, and then a ballot measure in the fall. And we heard that stories are so important in getting people to make collective decisions. And it's going to be really important for all of us to be telling our stories, and all of us to be reaching out into the communities where we belong, and help people tell those stories and have those stories be heard, so we can all band together and bring together the resources to maintain the public system that we have, and have it continue to be and be increasingly equitable and accessible. Let's see, San Francisco's challenges are sufficiently extra that there's going to be 2 ballot measures in San Francisco. So everybody in San Francisco is going to need to do so, all the more so. And so everybody who is on here and is signed up in the Bay Area will get follow-up information on things that you can do to be able to reach out to your neighbors, and things that you might can do to also volunteer yourself. Also, we had the state reauthorize its cap and trade program, which helps fund transit and rail. And speaking of a vision of the future, the high-speed rail system, and also the state's largest source of funding for affordable housing. So, for a vision of that future, that's another thing that was nailed down over the weekend, and it wasn't sure that that was going to happen as of a week or 2 ago. So for folks who are listening in from Southern California, let's see. So the things that we can do, then another thing that happened in the last week was some funding to keep the Bay Area running until a ballot measure were to happen. And Governor Newsom tried to back away from it, but there was a massive rally in San Francisco and the governor changed his mind. And so that was another thing that happened in the last couple of weeks that's making a better future possible, but where we're going to have to make it happen. One thing that I will ask is one thing that can help with this actually is that we've spent the last number of months helping to get this ballot measure bill done and less time doing the fundraising to make it happen. So if money is one of the things that you could happen to do, there is some resources back at the table that you can make a donation. Also, and for those that are listening in Southern California, our allies at Move LA were really a massive part of the effort to get the funding at the state level and taking the next steps in the state level as well. And if you're elsewhere in the US and around the world, where I think there's some people who are here elsewhere, look to what your local organization is and help support that because the future really is what we make it. It is up to us, so please do get involved. I'm going to hand it back to Audrey for more Q&A.
Okay, so I think we're live streaming. We're on Zoom, and I don't see any questions on Zoom. I was going to open it up to the Zoomer online people first, the Zoomers. So anyone here in person, we are open now to audience Q&A. Any questions about any of the physical stories or practical real life? Yes, sir, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
How much of an opportunity are public-private partnerships going to be able to step into the gap of the likely disappearance of a lot of federal funding over the next few years, or at least throughout this administration? There's been, talk about public-private in some high-speed rail to Vegas and others. So I'm just kind of curious if there's any sense of how realistic are those opportunities. Can you repeat the question for the people?
Repeating the question for people on Zoom is about how much public-private partnerships might be able to fill the gaps left by declining federal funding.
Just for you. Look, it's a Jeffery.
So while I think that there are many interesting opportunities, some of which have just been unlocked, or hopefully if the governor signs with not SB 79. What's the building intertransit SB
79? That's it.
79.
Yeah.
So one of the things that is potentially unlocked is the ability for transit agencies that own land to actually be able to really develop on that land and have that be a source of revenue. Unfortunately, no one's really building anything right now in California. And so while that is great in the long run, it doesn't help us in the short run. More importantly, where our real challenges lie is not with necessarily capital funding. Obviously, there's huge capital need, including lots of deferred maintenance need. The real emergency right now is operating budget. And it is really difficult to get operating funds through public-private partnerships. Like you can do a sponsorship deal for an asset, maybe for a construction project that generates real estate value. So you can sometimes get capital funding through partnerships. It's really challenging the operating side, which is again why it is so critical that we get community involvement and community funding so that we can gather signatures in order to bring the voter threshold down from 2/3 to 50%. We can win at 50%. It's really, really hard to win at 67%. And so for November of 26, having all of us nerds who love transit really participating in every way that we can, whether it's writing a check or going in our neighborhoods and collecting signatures, or telling our stories of how we'll be impacted if we don't find a solution for closing this financial gap.
Thank you. Any other, did I see another hand? Any other questions in the room? These can be about novels or speculative stories. There we are.
Hi. So early on, Annalee, I think you referenced a Miyazaki story with the cat bus. And I've always liked to tell people that I feel like Spirited Away is the movie that best encapsulates what it's like for me living in San Francisco, just with the fog everywhere and sort of the mysterious trains that sort of come and go, and nothing really seems to have any narrative sense. I'm kind of curious, what sort of fictional or speculative stories sort of speak to you most about the places where you live?
Well, I will continue with the story about Totoro. My Neighbor Totoro is an anime by Miyazaki where the story is these two very young children, their mother gets sick and she's in a hospital. And it's very distant from their home. They're living in the country and their mother is far away and they really miss her. And so a bus comes to get them, to bring them to the hospital, but it's not a regular bus. It's a cat, a giant cat with eyes like headlights. And the whole bus is very soft on the inside and the outside. And the bus is sentient and it flies and it kind of makes a row noise, just as a cat bus would. And I think it's a very powerful fantasy about transit because it is about mobility being for everyone and allowing for this connection for these kids to see their mom. And that is really, that is the small future. That's the small future we want, is that if I'm somebody who is vulnerable, who may not have the resources to like hop in a robo-taxi, that I can still go see my relative and that I have that ability to get away from my home and go somewhere else. And so that is the kind of thing that really does inspire me. And it is part of why that was an inspiration for the terraformers, is just imagining how mobility brings communities together and empowers people who have, very little power. Does anybody else want
to comment? I like the idea about mobility as being a feeling, because I think as a transportation planner, we never talk about that. And that's critical, right? Because if you're going to build a system and people don't feel good on it, they're not going to ride it. So I think this whole idea about feeling like a cat or feeling like these animals really adds a dimension that really speaks to people. Because transportation is not just not just getting from point A to point B, but it's a feeling. And it's never part of the equation. It's just never talked about. So we build these systems in LA, they don't feel good, so nobody rides them. You can't walk down the street, doesn't feel good, so you don't walk on the street. But that's that's missing in transportation, is that sense of feeling. Because when I do workshops with found objects, I have everybody build their first mobility experience. I want them to know that mobility is an experience. It's a feeling that we have to interject in the future. Because if we don't, people aren't going to move forward with it. So I think that's really great. You can bring it out in your science fiction writing. Thanks.
There's sort of like a dark side to the narrative component of mobility, though. I get it a lot on forum. Every time we do a show on BART, people write and call in to say, I don't feel safe on BART. And it's like completely without respect to any of the statistics for crime on BART. It has everything to do with people's perceptions of like riding through certain parts of town. A racialized imaginary. It is, and it's really tough because sometimes I have seen things on BART where you're sort of like, I wish I hadn't seen that. It does happen because you're in a public setting, and sometimes you just see stuff. And I think it's really tough because you want to transform the narrative around it. It feels possible to do, but people who have that experience then don't ride it again. And so it becomes like the single data point in the database. Whereas someone like me who rides BART, both ways 3 or 4 days a week, it's like, I know BART has gotten safer. Like it was kind of creepy during the pandemic, but it has gotten so much better. And it's basically as it was, which is to say normal city life. And there's this set of riders who, after the pandemic, have never come back, and they have some bad memories, and it's hard. I don't know the answer to like how you transform that, you know?
Can I do a bit?
Yeah, do a bit.
Jeff, tell me if this makes sense. You know how like you know how the retina is like the visible part of the human nervous system? Like when you like look in someone's eyes, you're actually observing the outside of their brain. It's the only part of your body that like works like this. And we like I don't know, because of that, or maybe just like incidentally attribute like mystical powers essentially to like looking in people's eyes. I think like public transit is the visible part of government. Like it's the optic nerve of government. Like it involves both like a social technology, right? Like a system of like behavior regarding infrastructure, as well as like a literal technology. And for whatever reason, like someone gets stabbed on a bus, it's like national news. Someone gets on a sidewalk, you get stabbed on a sidewalk. You've been on a sidewalk like 100 times as much as you've been on a bus. No one cares. It's weird, you know? So I don't know. Maybe some of us have been on a bus as much as on a sidewalk. Anyway, I think like public transit I don't know. It's possible. You imagine all kinds of worlds. I mean, I don't. Anyway, like I don't know. Do you think it's true? Do you think of like public transit as like almost like an exemplar function of government, like a piece of government that almost has to be like too good or unnecessarily good because we all demand that of it?
Well, public transit for many people, or the transportation system for many people, is the only aspect of government that you interact with every single day. And where you are a better expert than those bozos down at City Hall who are running this. Because if you have a driver's license, you are a licensed transportation professional. You probably don't think that about the wastewater system, but you absolutely think that about the transportation system because you've experienced it directly, all day, every day. It's also a place that plays in our unevaluated part of our mind in a profound way. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so happy that you brought up My Neighbor Totoro and the cat bus, because that story is so much about transportation, but it's also about how we counter our deeper fears. And one of the factors on public transportation that is different than driving your own car is the illusion of control. Cars are amazing in that you have so much illusion of control and agency, and what is it? 90% of American motorists believe they are significantly safer drivers than the average driver, right? Whereas in public transit, you don't have direct control. And so the reptilian cortex of the brain turns on and tells you to be afraid. And when you see people who are experiencing mental health or addiction crisis, man, does the reptilian cortex and the amygdala fires up and it says danger, which is exactly why, Alexis, as you were saying, all these people are saying, Bart, Muni, oh, it's so dangerous. Oh, there's so much crime. When it is clear from the statistics that crime is at a historic low. There is practically no crime on Muni, but there is an uptick in mental health and addiction across San Francisco. And every issue that happens on the streets of San Francisco finds its way onto public transit, and it makes us afraid. And what Miyazaki does so expertly is he looks at that nature of fear that we all experience as children. We think we've gotten over, but we have not. And in order to assuage that fear, we need more storytelling, like Miyazaki does, to tell us, no, it's going to be okay. And in order to make it okay, you need to make sure that you're taking extra care of your little sister. In order for it to be okay, you need to create space for children. And that's, again, one of the reasons why I was so inspired by Annalee's story in 2020 in the Chronicle, is it also spoke to that place where we're vulnerable.
I want to tell a super brief story about the 38. So I was taking the 38 every day to get to BART to get to a job. And one day we're coming up on Van Ness, and the bus is kind of slowing down. It's going to stop. And some guy in a Jaguar just like pulls out and around in front of the bus, just like really ripping and like totally illegal, like clearly taking an illegal right turn in front of the bus. And the bus taps the car, taps it. Okay. It's a Jaguar, right? So the guy in the car jumps out. He's just losing his shit. The bus driver is like freaked out because he's just scared that he hurt the guy, which the guy was not hurt. Everybody in the bus was lining up to talk to the cops about how much this guy in the Jaguar sucked, how correct the bus driver was. It was like it was the greatest moment of bus solidarity I've ever experienced. And I think that this speaks to the kind of what you were saying about like, what is the experience of mobility? How do we make the experience of mobility into a communal experience where we all feel like we're part of the same team? We're in it together. We're not like, fighting our neighbors. We're not like, occasionally one of our members of our community will occasionally take a dump on the train, and that's just, it happens. But that's the feeling that I think we want to imagine and we want to project into the future is like, yeah, we're in it together, and we're again in it together against this car that is being unsafe and wasteful, and against cars in general, but especially that guy and that car. And so, yeah, the cops definitely got like 40 statements that day. So I'm pretty sure that dude went down.
You can also write commendations for your bus drivers and mail them to Muni. They love that.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for doing it.
Thank you. So we have one question in the Zoom chat. I'm just going to read this out loud for everybody. For the online participants, please share to whom we can donate to support the ballot initiatives. And the answer is, we may be biased here, but please consider donating to Seamless Bay Area. We've been working for 2 years to make sure the regional transit funding measure included all 5 counties and includes provisions for more coordinated transit. Going forward, we will be part of the coalition of organizations working to pass the measure. So give a round of applause to Seamless Bay Area for all the work. Awesome. And back to the room. Was there another hand anywhere? Oh, yes, sir, right here in front. Get him a microphone. Yeah, perfect. Thank you for waiting for the microphone.
Going back to what you were saying about storytelling and what Alexis was saying about, perceived BART versus actual BART crime. Why is it so easier to tell the negative story than the positive story?
I don't know. I mean, I think honestly, it goes to that sort of surface area of government. A friend of mine was in Scandinavia a few years ago and was getting onto some sort of transit system, and there was no there was no way to make you pay. You just could walk on, and that was fine. And so she was asking her friend, she was like, why isn't there like the government like making you pay? And she was like, here, the government is like inside you, And I think there's like a piece of that around this story. It's like our transit systems feel like a reflection of American society too, which is to say that, they feel more individualistic, like every single person should be paying, they should be like carrying their weight, our community shouldn't support everyone. And I don't think we have like that larger meta narrative about what our society is or should be or can be that then is like filtering down to the subcategory of transit and this like sort of surface area of government and society. I mean, that's what it seems like to me, that we're still trying to find this like emerging collective sense of urban America that is solidaristic, pluralistic, and concerned with each other's, care and safety rather than crime and punishment. And I think one thing that's been just remarkable is to see, in a post-2020 world, to see the crime and punishment narratives just come roaring back. I mean, Jesus Christ, like I kind of want to go back and like just play people what they said in 2021 and be like, did everything change this much? Like, I'm just not sure, you know? So I don't know. I think that has a huge part. It's a huge part.
I was going to plug a panel that I'm going to be on Monday that's also part of Transit Month that will be live streamed, and it's about storytelling in Hollywood in transit, and it's about like how to get those narratives inserted into, you know, mass media culture. Adam Conover will be on it, Ed Begley Jr., you know, devoted like transit users. But I think the thing that I was looking at when, you know, all the amazing examples of you know, you brought when you brought up like my neighbor Twitter, like I thought about my kids, right? Because they live in a completely different, they're 8 and 10. They live in a completely different framework than what you said. Like to them, like the bus and the train is the greatest thing on earth and 10 times better than a car. And they love to, you know, make in Minecraft their like little transit systems and decide where they go. And so maybe if we get to them when they're that age, you know, they don't have to see this different framing. And they seem to already get it. You know, they get the like collectivism and like the cooperation and the every bus is a community that you step into. I love that. And that's why sometimes buses have better vibes than trains because you're in more of a one little unit instead of the spread out unit of like a few different cars. Open gangway, let's do more of them. Yeah, that helps a lot. There's no, yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I think the kids are kind of gonna change this narrative for us. They hate cars. They like really are anti-car in a lot of different ways.
And Alissa, how do we log on to your panel?
I'll put the link, but it's in, if you look on the SoCal Transit Month, it's on my like Instagram, a walker in LA. But if you look at like the SoCal Transit Month, yeah, okay. Move LA has been promoting it also. So if you look at Move LA, but yeah, it'll be Monday. So
thank you for that. So I think we have one more question. I think Adina had a question.
Yeah, this was a one that was off of Zoom where there's a contrast between stories of transit, where the transit really reshapes the world, like in Terraformers or Terra Ignota. And those where transit is styled as a bulwark protecting people from the strangeness of the world, like Doctor Who's Gridlock episode or Christopher Priest's Inverted World. How do we blend these two tendencies to create stories of a transit future we want to live in?
I mean, one of the things that I always say about the work that I do is that it's not utopian or dystopian, it's just topian. It's about a place that has, you know, problems and solutions. Every solution that we come up with in transit is always going to create more problems. And I think part of what we do when we dream about a better world is we're like, okay, well, we're going to get there and it's going to be great. And then that's it. And the fact is, when we get there, there's going to be some new weird ass issue that you never even thought of, some new labor problem, some new technical problem, some new form of pollution, new forms of traffic problems, like in the Doctor Who episode that they referenced. And so what we have to be prepared for is to build toward futures that are contingent and that are just one stop on the way toward another future, and to always remember that every fix is also a new mistake. And we just have to be prepared to acknowledge that and just be like, yeah, okay, well, we screwed up again, but we also got a little closer to being, you know, more inclusive and like more, you know, better serving the public. And we screwed up again, but we're gonna keep trying. And I think that's the childlike kind of point of view that we're talking about, is it's like, yeah, we mess up, but we get up and we dust off and we build a better train next time.
And I think Adina, I think we're at time. So
in closing, so for the every solution, it also brings its problems. I also want to plug Pacific Circuit, which is Alexis Madrigal's newest book and has some of the bar history. Anna's Drop Dead Brilliant, so I highly recommend it. And for those that have not yet read Terraformers, Annalee Newitz's book from a few years ago, plus Automatic Noodle, which only has tiny little bits about transportation, but is still awesome. So thank you very much for coming. The next the other panel is on Transit Month. So if you if you actually can't see it on the Bay Area Transit Month, we will still send it out to everybody who came here. And on your way out, there's some really awesome transit swag. So if you want to wear your identity or celebrate your identity as a transit supporter, feel free to do that on your way out. Thank you very much for coming and helping to celebrate the present, the present and future of transit, and helping to build the world that we want to live in. Thank you.